Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parvatipacharya, Tadasata Shri Shri Mad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki, Grantarad Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Samveda Bhaktivedanta Ki, all glories to some devotees, all glories. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakhaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaka Damayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right. So today, 3/8/27. Mukeno lokarti hara smitena. Mukena lokarti hara smitena. Parispurat kandala manditena. Parispurat kundala manditena. Shonayite nadhara bimba bhasa. So shonayite nadhara bimba bhasha. Pratyar hayandham sunasena subr. This is a tough one here. Pratyar hayandham surasena subhrva. Pratyar hayantam surasena subhrava. Mukena lokarti hara smitena. Paris purat kandala manditena. Shonaitena dhara bimba bhasa.
Pratyarhayantam Sudasena Subhrava. Mukhena lokarti harasmritena parispurat kundala manditena Shaunaitena dharabhimba bhasa Pratyarhayantam Sudasena Subhrava. Mukhena lokarti harasmitena parispurat kundala manditena Shonaitena dharabhimba bhasa Satyarhayantam Sudasena Subhrava. Mukhena lokarti harasmitena parispurat kundala manditena Shonaitena dharabhimba bhasa Pratyarhayantam Sudasena Subhrava. Mukhena lokarti harasmitena parispurat kundala manditena Shonaitena dharabhimba bhasa Pratyarhayantam Sunasena Subhrava. Mukhena, by a gesture of the face. Loka arti hara, vanquisher of the distresses of the devotee. Smitena, by smiling. Parispurat, dazzling. Kundala, earrings. Manditena, decorated with. Shonayitena, acknowledging. Adhara, of his lips. Bimba, reflection. Bhasa, rays. Pratyarhayantam, reciprocating. Sunasena, by his pleasing nose. Subhrava. An interesting consonant cluster there. By and pleasing eyebrows. So here is the translation. He also acknowledged the service of the devotees and vanquished their distress by his beautiful smile. The reflection of his face, decorated with earrings, was so pleasing because it dazzled with the rays from his lips and the beauty of his nose and eyebrows. So I say, and you all please repeat. He also acknowledged the service of the devotees and vanquished their distress by his beautiful smile. The reflection of his face, decorated with earrings, was so pleasing because it dazzled with the rays from his lips and the beauty of his nose and eyebrows. Okay, so here's the translation. The purport. Devotional service to the Lord is very much obliging to him. There are many transcendentalists in different fields of spiritual activities, but devotional service to the Lord is unique. Devotees do not ask anything from the Lord in exchange for their service. Even the most desirable liberation is refused by the devotees, although it's offered by the Lord. Thus, the Lord becomes a kind of debtor to the devotees, and he can only try to repay the devotees' service with his ever-enchanting smile. The devotees are ever satisfied by the smiling face of the Lord, and they become enlivened. And by seeing the devotees so enlivened, the Lord himself is further satisfied. So there is a competition, there is a continuous transcendental competition between the Lord and his devotees by such reciprocation of service and acknowledgement. Mukhena lokarti hara smitena parispurat kandala manditena shonaitena dharabimba basa pratyar hayantam sunasena subhrva. He also acknowledged the service of the devotees and vanquished their distress by his beautiful smile. The reflection of his face, decorated with earrings, was so pleasing because it dazzled with rays from his lips and the beauty of his nose and eyebrows. This is a description of Krishna. And particularly, this verse focuses in on Krishna's smile. And Krishna's smile is a very mysterious thing. You can wonder, what can the being who's in charge of everything, who sees everything at all times and all places, who controls everything, what can he be thinking? It's mind-boggling, you know. And when you look at the deities in the morning or any time that you go before Radha Govinda Deva, I used to contemplate this when I was living in New Vrindavan before Radha Vrindavan Chandra. You know, I would think, what are they trying to tell me right now? And you kind of notice over time that the expression of the deities changes. Maybe it's just what's going on in my mind or something like that. But, you know, I used to think that in New Vrindavan, that Radha Vrindavan Chandra, Krishna was always kind of telling me, all right, just keep going. You'll make it if you just stay with it. And Radha in New Vrindavan was always kind of more of the mood saying, you're an idiot, you know. I had that kind of vibe, you know, whereas here, I'm not sure what Radha Govinda is telling him, but Radha Rani is always saying, just please go on, you know. It's kind of a different mood, but the smile is what's kind of, it's beguiling, it's mysterious. Here, it's saying it's reassuring, you know, Krishna's smile reassures the devotees. Is he about to laugh? Or is he smiling because he's just indulging my particular material ideas? You know, he's saying, all right. You know, there's this joke that says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So it's, you know, kind of like that, you know. In one sense, since he's generally always smiling, it's kind of like a poker face in one sense. You don't know what is actually there, you know. And of course, since Krishna is always, you know, in transcendental bliss, we can say that he is smiling a smile of enjoyment. So he's always enjoying. So we're seeing this reciprocation between Brahma and the Supreme Lord. That Brahma has been created. He tried to crawl down the lotus. He couldn't get anywhere. Then he came out and he performed austerities. He pleased the Lord. And now he's getting the darshan of the Lord. So that's kind of what's happened. We're seeing two simultaneous dialogues here. The deeper dialogue is Krishna and his interaction with Lord Brahma. The more immediate dialogue is the one between Maitreya and Vidura. So it's Maitreya is explaining this dialogue between Krishna and, or this interplay right now, it's not a dialogue, between Krishna and Brahma. In a little while, in the next chapter, in chapter 9, we're going to hear the prayers of Lord Brahma. So here we're learning about his austerities and how he pleases the Supreme Lord. And because he pleases the Supreme Lord, he gets the mercy of the Lord and he can understand what he needs to do to create the universe. So in this section, we have several overarching themes that kind of come out, and we hear them referred to a number of times, this idea of austerity to gain knowledge, and our Tulsi commented the other day, or tied it into a verse in the 5th canto, 551, Rishabha Uvacha, Nayam Deho Deha, Bhajan Riloka Kastan Kamad, Arhate Vidbujamye, Tapo Divyam Putra Kayena Sattvam Sudyed Yasmad Brahmasokyam Tvanantam, which is a very important verse, Nayam Deho Deha Bhajan Riloke Kastan Kamad Arhate Vidbujamye, Tapo Divyam Putra Kayena Sattvam Yasmad or Sudyed Yasmad Brahmasokyam Tvanantam, that my dear boys, he's, Rishabdev is speaking to his 100 sons, and he's saying, my dear boys, those who have achieved the human form of light should not work very hard day and night for sense gratification, which is, after all, available even to dogs and hogs that eat stool. Rather, one should engage in transcendental devotional service. And by getting this knowledge, one needs to perform some austerity. And this austerity will ultimately bestow on one transcendental bliss, which is transcendental to all material miseries and, for that matter, happiness as well. So this is the idea that one has to perform tapo divyam, or some kind of austerity. So Brahma had to perform it. We have to perform it. And by doing this austerity, we become eligible for transcendental knowledge. So that's one theme in this area of Srimad Bhagavatam, this idea of performing austerity for transcendental knowledge. Another theme is the guru and disciple, because here we have the theme of Vidura getting instruction from Maitreya as a disciple. So we have the guru and disciple, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And we also have the theme of the creation of the material world. That's also going on in this section. So we're hearing a lot about that. There's, each verse has its own particular focus, but we're hearing these overarching themes for the most part, guru and disciple. We're hearing about, performing austerities for the sake of transcendental knowledge. And we're hearing about the creation of the universe. Let's focus in for a minute on this idea of transcendental knowledge. what makes transcendental knowledge different from mundane knowledge? So please use the microphone. Is it set up? It's all. Yes.
One difference between transcendental knowledge and regular knowledge is transcendental knowledge can only come from the descending process, where regular knowledge could perhaps come from an descending or ascending process.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. There's many reasons why they're different. Someone else have another way that we could describe the difference between. Actually, they have a microphone that you can throw. It comes in a little, kind of sort of soft cube. And if it falls on the ground, it doesn't damage the microphone, but it's hideously expensive.
Yeah, I saw an ad for it and I looked at the price.
Yeah, when I looked at the price and said, forgot about it immediately.
I was thinking that actually transcendental knowledge is knowledge, whereas material knowledge at the end of the day is ignorance.
Yeah.
It's not
Right.
real knowledge. And that's why the result from both is different.
Right.
One is spiritual existence and the other is bondage in the material.
Right. Any other differentiations between transcendental knowledge and mundane knowledge?
Transcendental knowledge is like here, whereas material knowledge is like stool.
Also, transcendental knowledge gives happiness and
Yeah,
material knowledge brings suffering.
suffering and entanglement in the material world. You were going to say something else, or you just retrieved the mic?
There was this already said, transcendental knowledge can reveal, like we were talking about, what is God thinking? It can reveal the emotions and internal psychology of God,
Right.
which is
So
not even imaginable.
transcendental knowledge, ultimately it describes Krishna. It's connected to Krishna. We hear about that in the Ishopanishad, that knowledge means knowledge about Krishna. Everything is connected ultimately to Krishna. When you take anything and disconnect it from Krishna, it becomes mundane and it no longer has the ability to satisfy. It misleads, and it's ultimately relative. So those are aspects of it. We can think that in our modern school system, we have colleges of various types. And this plays into kind of the theme of the guru and the disciple. Now, we have also knowledge, and we have it in our books, and we have a kind of college like what we're doing today. So what makes the difference between knowledge we get from a book and knowledge we get from the guru? Why do we need a guru? Let's start first by asking the question, why do we have a professor in a college? Why can't the students just go to the college and get books and sit in the classroom, maybe with some nice music playing and somebody to, ride shotgun in case somebody starts making a disturbance, but why can't colleges work like that? Why do we have teachers? Before we talk about guru, let's ask, why do we have teachers? Yeah.
Well, for one, everyone is a little different in how they're going to learn something. So the teacher is kind of like a dynamic principal that they know everything that's in the book and also how to deliver it properly if they're a good teacher, at least. And if the student has a question that doesn't understand what's in the book, if the teacher understands it, they can explain it to the student. Whether the student is left with the book, as soon as they have a misunderstanding, then that's maybe where their learning slows down or stops.
Right. I think that's a very important part, is that the teacher has the ability to understand whether the student understands the book or not, whereas the book can't tell you you misunderstood it. But there's more. Why else do we have teachers?
I was thinking that the teacher actually, he did what the student now is supposed to do. So he already have practical experience on the subject. And then he can very easily give like a shortcuts how you can be faster successful.
Right. You can give tips and shortcuts that probably would not be in the book.
Also, if we try to correct ourselves, there is a big chance that we'll be very lenient to our shortcomings.
That we what?
Very not pay too much attention to our lack of qualities.
Right.
Let's say we see that we are lacking something, we'll say, anyway, what's the problem? But then the teacher, this is one of his duties. He has to show what is lacking and where we have to put more endeavor.
What else can we say about this? Is kind of a big subject. I'm doing some research right now on the guru and disciple, because there's this several propositions coming up from Sabha and the GBC and other devotees. And so it's interesting. I just kind of did a quick review of Spiritual Master and Disciple, which is a book that was put together by a devotee named Subhananda. It has no explanations in it. It is just a collection of all of quotes from various parts of scripture about the guru and disciple. But getting back to the concept of why we have teachers and not just books, another thing I might add is that usually to learn something, we have some kind of already existing knowledge in our lives. You know, it came from somewhere. You know, when a student takes a college course, he's been through so many years of learning ABCs. He's been through so many years of, you know, learning maybe basic mathematics. He's been through so many years of learning the procedure of how colleges work. So there's all this underlying structure or platform. And then the teacher can build on that. And this is why I think that Krishna consciousness is so hard for people to grasp, because to some extent we have to bulldoze a lot of all that, you know, that a lot of our common everyday understandings of the world are drastically wrong. And so when a person picks up Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, they're mystified by certain things, completely mystified by it, because what the Bhagavatam is saying, what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, contradicts common perceptions or the whole foundational platform on which people base their knowledge of the world. Most people think the world is here for us to enjoy. And those people who are going to school are learning mundane knowledge for the express purpose of then being able to use that mundane knowledge to be able to magnetically attract some dollar bills. And then once they attract the dollar bills, they can, use those dollar bills to get those things that they want. And so this is basic framework they're working with. And, you know, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita completely reject all that. I mean, they accept that it exists, but that it's a perfect way to waste your life, you know. So this is why a teacher is there to recognize what your foundations are that are wrong, so that then the proper foundation can be laid. And then when we start to read, then everything comes much, much more easily, and it makes a lot more sense, because you did not know that you had a foundational misunderstanding of something. And so the guru does this, and even regular mundane teachers do this to some extent. But in transcendental knowledge, we have to do this much, much more. It's much, much more. Mostly, I think people are under the misconception that we just pull little pieces of information together and we build up a view of the world. But all those pieces of information have to connect to one another in some way or another. If they don't, then we have a worldview that's, you know, as Prabhupada calls it, rupturous. It's just everything goes in different directions. It's not coherent. And I think probably if we examined a lot of people's worldview, that would pretty much describe their worldview. They believe a lot of different things that contradict one another, and there's no fundamental viewpoint. But that's what makes Krishna consciousness very different, is that every piece of it ties into every other piece of it. And you can see a foundation and you can get a grasp of the entire thing. Now, beyond these mundane aspects of thinking about knowledge as downloading data, you know, Krishna consciousness certainly has, you know, written words, and we absorb them, we memorize them, and we try to understand them. So in one sense, we're also trying to download data, but transcendental knowledge is different from downloading data in what particular ways? This is the next item that I want to, what is it that we do that regular people don't do, say in a college or in everyday life, to try to understand a mundane subject matter? What is important for assuming or assimilating transcendental knowledge that's usually not thought of?
There's a whole lifestyle around assuming the knowledge, the transcendental knowledge, whereas in college, your professor can be a drunkard and be maybe shooting up some drugs right before he walks into the class, and you know, still know about economics or whatever the subject may be. Whereas, you know, you won't, you know, generally understand that unless we come to this platform of chanting 16 rounds and following the 4 regular principles, and the transcendental knowledge won't be revealed to us.
Why is that important?
It's important to have like the whole lifestyle set, because it's based on, like, the knowledge is not, it's like we were saying before, it's the descending process, not the ascending process. And so it depends on, you know, getting the mercy from the superiors and from the Supreme Lord. So, you know, our whole day is based on, you know, following what they want, praying for them, try to get their mercy, and trying to live a life so that our, you know, it's also state dependent knowledge. Like, you know, if we're not in, you know, getting out of the modes of material nature and in the transcendental, then we can't understand the transcendental. So therefore we base all our activities to try to stay transcendental.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Those two items that transcendental knowledge, mundane knowledge is not so much this way, but transcendental knowledge is this way. It's state dependent and mercy dependent. So you can study the Vedas, but if you're doing it, you know, in a haughty, scholastic way, you won't get any real juice out of them. Prabhupada described it as, you know, like a licking the outside of a jar of honey. You know, you won't get any taste from it. And state dependent is a very important part too, because if you don't have the right clear and dhira or stable consciousness, you can't absorb transcendental ideas. They will just dart by you. They'll go over your head. You won't be able to grasp them and hang on to them. So, if we had the same analogy of, say, a professor coming in to give a lecture in a college classroom, and as he walks in the room, he notices that the students have, like a fifth of vodka or something, and they passed it around, and they're kind of half shot, Will he begin a very detailed lecture on some very esoteric or difficult subject matter, like mathematics or medicine or some other thing? He won't do it because he knows that right now their mental state is totally non-conducive to being able to understand or to be able to assimilate fine and detailed ideas. And so in a similar way, it's both state-specific and mercy-specific. So if we try to assimilate transcendental knowledge, but we don't have the mercy to do it because we're doing it in an arrogant and incorrect way, or we're living a lifestyle that causes us to be intoxicated or mentally disturbed, then also we can't absorb transcendental knowledge. But there's one more thing that we could say. Let's see if anyone can, that impinges on this.
I was thinking that, like as we are saying very often, the spiritual master or the guru, he is acharya, and he's imbibing completely this knowledge in his life. And when the student is seeing these qualities, this example, he becomes enthusiastic to follow this goal, to try to achieve the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but that's really important. That's an important part, that the
source of enthusiasm.
Right, the teacher or guru is the acharya, or the as we would call it in Western terminology, the archetype. The person that shows how it's done in their own personal example, which, it does a lot of things. It gives credibility to the process because someone's actually being able to do it. It shows visually how to do something that you can describe in thousands of words, but, you can see somebody actually doing it. And then it also gives a person because we all have a sense of the mood or character of others. If that character is very attractive, then naturally we're attracted to that. Then that's another reason why we get knowledge. We feel enthusiastic, and in a similar way, even in a mundane college or something like that, if the teacher is really keyed up on the subject matter that he's teaching, then naturally the students will be far more enthusiastic to follow and understand than they would if he's doing it in a very blasé or cut and dried way, as a job, as a hack. I thought of one more thing that I think sort of is part of this whole idea of the transferal, tapo divyam, or we could say, the idea of how do we get divya gya, or transcendental knowledge? And that is, one has to be free from sin. That's another thing that that you would not expect in a college. In a college, they're not going to ask you if you're free from sin. They're not going to ask you if you're doing good sadhana. These things are not necessary in a college, but in transcendental knowledge, we do need to, take these things into consideration. So the spiritual master, he absorbs the sin, and he teaches us to live in a way where we are gradually minimizing the amount of sinful activities we're engaged in. And this also makes it easy. So now I wanted to kind of go to another topic which is related to this, because we're talking about the guru and the disciple. So in the spiritual master and disciple, I was just kind of looking at it. It has several sections. The main section describes there's a big section, because what Subhananda did was he just collected quotes from various parts of things Prabhupada said, things that are actually said in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Nectar of Instruction, et cetera, et cetera. So he collected these quotes. And the biggest part is the absolute necessity for accepting a spiritual master. So that's a big section of it. Then we have an explanation of the qualities. These are the categories of the book. We have an explanation of the qualities of the spiritual master. And then we have also an explanation of what the qualities should be of the disciple. And then we have something called the parampara, how this all fits into the parampara. So, does anybody remember any important slokas or verses that specifically deal with any of these aspects of the spiritual master, the qualities of the spiritual master, the necessity to have one, what the spiritual master does, etc.? Yes, go, Paul Champa.
Hare Krishna. So the first one that came to mind right away, Maharaj, is 11:3:21.
Yeah.
Just Tatsmat Gurun Prapadyeta Jignasya Uttama Sabde Pare Chanisthanam Pramit Upasamashraya. Therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of this bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Personality God, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters.
Right. That's the one that comes to my mind first. That's the Navayogendra speaking to Maharaj Nimi. And so Maharaj Nimi asks the Navayogendras about illusion. So he asks them what is illusion? How does the Supreme Lord's illusion work? And so the Navayogendras reply to that. And then he asks the follow-up question of how does one get out of illusion? And this verse comes up, Tasmad Gurun Prapadyeta Jigeshu Shreyamutama Shabde Parecha Nishnatam Brahmani Upasamashrayam. This is a key verse. Any other ones? Right.
So that's like the qualities of the bona fide guru. And I guess also the qualities of disciple. To understand these things properly, one must humbly approach with firewood in hand a spiritual master who is learned in the Vedas and firmly devoted to the absolute truth.
Where is our firewood? Oh yeah, they've been transferred into paper. Right. So yes, Tulsi has a yeah, right. Yeah, right. Navam manye takarhichid. What does that mean?
Krishna, and one should never consider Acharya ordinary human,
Uh-huh.
and one should never be
Envious of him. Right. 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 So there are all these ideas. How should one choose a guru? Yeah. What's that? That's the nicest smile, yeah. Like Krishna's smile.
Whoever has the nicest smile.
I was thinking for a long on this topic when I had to choose a guru. So how to choose a guru. And I was reading some books of Gaur Govinda Maharaj in this connection.
Of who?
Gaur Govinda Swami. And he was explaining that we can try to see if the guru has certain qualities, basically with our intelligence to understand. And this is helpful to some extent, but at the end of the day, you cannot actually judge with your material intelligence who is spiritually qualified. So he was saying, at the end, we just have to go to Krishna and pray that Krishna, please send me a real spiritual master, real guru, and hope that Krishna will make this arrangement for us.
So we also, it says, in scriptures that the disciple and the guru should test one another at least for 1 year. In one place it says 3 years. And how the disciple should test the spiritual master is to see that he's speaking what's in the Vedic literatures and that he's walking the talk, that he's not saying one thing and doing something different. He's not a cheater. He's not breaking the regulative principles or something like that. And this brings us around to a really important point, and that often we will hear this Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu triangle, that if we want to know what the absolute truth is, if we reference it from all 3 points of view, from Guru, from Sadhu, and Shastra, then we know that we are have the genuine article. We haven't been cheated in some kind of way. So let's stop and think for a minute. What is it that when do we need to refer to Shastra in this triangle? What is it that Shastra can do that Guru and Sadhu can't do? Or in general, I mean, they could do it, but there's some special quality of Shastra that we might need to clarify things.
One thing that came to my mind is that the Shastra is this fixed and it's always there. Whereas, you may not have like the Guru right in front of you to ask or a Sadhu right in front of you to ask, but, you can always, the Sadhu, the Shastra can stay there, among generations and, that's one idea.
That's there. Any other thoughts? Yeah, I think Tulsi has a thought there.
The Shastra is infallible in any circumstance, whereas sometimes we see that Sadhu or Guru, they can be deviated for some time.
Yeah, that's getting to what I'm thinking about. As I was saying a little bit earlier, that if we're going to judge who is a genuine guru, how will we do that? We have to judge it based on Shastra, So here we have something outside, because you could have someone who is very eloquent, someone who's charismatic. You could have someone even has magic potencies, et cetera, et cetera. But the question is, are they saying the same thing as Shastra? So that means that we have to be somewhat versed in Shastra to know a guru. And for that matter, also sadhus. If we have several sanghas of transcendentalists, then we can judge whether the Sangha is a proper Sangha by whether it's in accordance with Shastra. Okay, now let's look at it from the other way. What is it that the Guru can do that in this triangle of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra? What is it that's the special ability of the Guru?
He can chastise.
Right, he can chastise. The Shastras, they can do that indirectly, and sometimes they do, but right.
He can also dovetail a disciple's tendencies in the right way so that he can
Right.
be engaged in Krishna service.
He can tailor, because the Shastras, no book, no matter how big or how many volumes it has, can deal with every possible situation. So the Guru can tailor the prescription. Sometimes Prabhupada uses the idea of you go into a medicine cabinet or to a medicine apothecary, a drugstore. There's so many medications. Which one do you take? You need the doctor to say, you take that one. Right now, that's the one you need. So that's another thing. What else?
And he can initiate the disciple into the sampradaya. The
Right.
Shastra sadhus cannot do that.
Right. That's another thing. There's something else I'm thinking of that's important. And yeah, maybe Gopal Champu's thought of it.
Wow. The thought came and I realized that coming probably similar, same thing that Arjuna Nanda was saying. The Guru can take on your sinful reactions, your karma, but as part of initiation.
Right.
Well, I was thinking that the Shastra generally stays in one place and you have to approach Shastra, whereas Guru sometimes he comes and he's the active side. He comes to you and he's telling you, you're rascal. You have. Well, Shastra is passive. That
Right.
we have to approach Shastra, whereas
Right.
Guru sometimes he comes and he approaches the disciple.
Right. One thing I am always thinking of is if the Vedic literature is confusing or is not easily understood, that's what the Guru can do, is to clarify, like we were talking a minute ago about the teacher example. Or the Guru can also understand that the disciple may think he understands Shastra, but he's misunderstood it, which you would never be able to do if you just had Shastra. So that's why you couldn't get spiritual life just with Shastra. But at the same time, you can't get spiritual life with just Guru, because a Guru could be teaching anything, Now, what about sadhu? What do we mean by sadhu in this triangle?
Sadhu means those who are practicing what's in the Shastras, or you can say, generally we refer to senior devotees who have been around and become learned in the subject, and then can help guide. And also, Guru is a sadhu as well.
Right. So sadhus is the collective body of devotees who are following the Vaishnava tradition, both present and past. So this is also a indication of the parampara system, that there has been a method of understanding the scriptures, and it's not just a recent occurrence. It's traceable through history. When we have sometimes various issues that come up, philosophical issues, they're not the first time these issues have come up. We can see that someone argued these points hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, and we can go back to the conclusions that they had. So it's a movement forward, a collection of commonly held understandings. So this is, again, you could have a Shastra like the Vedic literature. You could have, say, a Mayavad interpretation of the Shastras. And so here you've got a Guru. Here you've got a Shastra, and the Mayavad's claiming to describe, what the Shastra is saying, but it's not in accord with the parampara or the Vaishnavas through time immemorial coming down from Brahma, to, our parampara. So this is why that's also a key feature, that the guru has to be also in contact with the body of devotees, that have had a similar conclusion. If the guru is got a completely new conclusion or a incorrect or rupturous conclusion, then we can see that as questions on the teachings of the guru, and maybe he's not actually a guru. He only appears to be, so on and so forth. So that's why in the future, through your devotional life, you will find that many mysterious things happen and questions arise. And so if you can take advantage of all three of these, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then you will be on very firm territory. You'll be in a very good position to understand what is actually the truth. Because sometimes, even in ISKCON, gurus can start doing wild things. You went to their classes, their teachings, et cetera, but then suddenly things start to go in a new direction. And is that, in fact, in keeping with the sadhus? Is it in keeping with the Vedic literature? Or on the other side of the coin, you have Vedic literature, and you have somebody comes up with some new verse or some new way of looking at it. So how do we think about it? So we ask the sadhus, we try to reference it with what people said about that idea in the past. And then we have, in some cases in ISKCON, you may see, or it certainly happens in a lot of other religious organizations, a branch coming off. A group of people within a larger community who have a somewhat different view of things. It may just be, not everything is wrong. There is room for some innovations. There is room for some differences. But on some things, there isn't room for that. So then you can judge whether this split off is actually in keeping with the actual tradition of Krishna consciousness by referencing it with Shastra and with Guru. So all these three things keep the other two in balance. Each one has its way of doing something that the other two don't do that helps us to keep it all in balance. And so if something tallies with all three, with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then we know that we're actually on firm footing, that this is actually the real absolute truth. So we'll end there unless somebody has a question or a final remark or whatever. Yes, June.
Well, I was just thinking that sometimes nowadays, if we see, it has more become a fashion that we have to, when the devotees also say that we have to go to Dham and pray for a guru, and then the guru comes. Whereas in the scriptures, we see if a disciple is sincere in wanting to attain Krishna, that time a guru is sent. And also, we also see that, especially in the organizational setting, maybe there is a requirement for test, like we have to test a guru. But I couldn't recollect any example from the scriptures where a disciple has to test the spiritual master before.
No, it's definitely there. I can find you the references. Prabhupada said it, that in Vedic literatures, I just read a Shastric Advisory Committee paper on gurus, and there is this idea in Vedic literature of the disciple. It's not just one way. It's not just that the guru is testing disciple. Both have to test each other. that the disciple has to be convinced that the guru is genuine, that he's living by what he says, and he's not secretly breaking principles, and that he's not actually a Mayavadi. He's not teaching something that's outside the scope. And when the disciple is more or less convinced of that, then that's a... And so mostly Prabhupada used to say that it should judge for 1 year, but in another place, there's a place where it mentions 3 years. So I can, if later on, I can maybe send you the document. Yeah.
One example that is coming now to my mind is Pundarika Vidyanidhi. Pundarika Vidyanidhi, this example. There was a test there that Gadadhar, he was not.
But it's different. It's not.
Yeah, but he was presented as a great guru, great Vaishnava, but he didn't accept it. He said, I'm not sure about that.
Right, right.
Because he doesn't look like that. He
Right.
doesn't look like a great Vaishnava. So there was a test, but the test was very fast. It took like few minutes.
Well, we can see that in the modern world that there's, not just within ISKCON, but there's so many people we could accept as gurus. And there's lots of people on the internet that are, and if we don't have any discrimination, why not accept one of them? But we know that it's not just someone who speaks or someone who can enthuse us or someone who's charismatic, but it's actually someone who's speaking in concert with the Vedic literature and with the parampara system of a particular viewpoint of the Vedic literature. And therefore, then we have something that's exclusive. And if we're convinced that a person follows or has those qualifications, then we're good, Okay, so thank you all very much. It was a nice, lively discussion today. So, all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. And may we always get Krishna's smile, his mysterious, seductive, reassuring, and enchanting smile. Hare Krishna.
I remember something interesting.
What's that?